Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission on Tuesday, February 25, 2025. This meeting is called to order. Margaret, would you please call the roll?
Present.
Commissioner Prevatelli, Commissioner Rodby.
Here.
Commissioner Sade, Commissioner Summers,
Here.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Kent,
Here.
Chair Haven.
Here.
Commissioners Prevatelli and Sade have excused absences this evening. Commissioner Sade may make it at a later date in this meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Now to the order of the agenda. Are there any commissioners that would like to request changes to the order of the agenda? Nope. Seeing none, next we will move to the meeting procedures. The City of San Rafael remains committed for all to participate in our public meetings. I want to welcome all that are making the time this evening to participate. Margaret, would you please tell us how public comment will work this evening?
Absolutely, Chair Haven. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. Viewers can also watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda or by dialing 669-444-9171 and entering the meeting ID 836-5104-9034 #. We are offering closed captioning this evening through the meeting on Zoom. To take advantage of that, you would select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable the feature. If you experience any technical difficulties this evening, please email me, Margaret Kavanaugh Lynch. I'm on the website, but the email is margaret-kavanaughh-lynch@cityofsanrafael.org. I'm also planning manager, so if you're going quickly, just go to the planning page and you can hit my name there. Okay. In order to provide oral testimony, speakers must be present. Displayed on the podium is a timer that will help you stay within your allotted time frame. You are invited, though not required, to introduce yourself, say what part of San Rafael you reside in, or if you reside from outside the city. If you'd like to request an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide public comment virtually, please submit your request to my office 72 hours in advance of the meeting at the same email that I gave earlier. That is the participation rules for this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is oral communication from the public. Remarks on non-agenda items are welcome at this time and may be on anything within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Please know that remarks on the agenda items will be heard at the time the item is discussed. Is there anybody who would like comments they would like to make tonight? It appears not. Then we will move on to the consent calendar, but there are no items on the consent calendar this evening, so we'll move on to agenda items. Action items. The action item for this evening is 131 Valley View Avenue, appeal to the Planning Commission of the Community and Economic Development Director's approval of a request for a reasonable accommodation to allow special modifications to the existing residence at 131 Valley View Avenue. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes, sir. Good evening again. My name is Margaret Kavanaugh Lynch, Planning Manager, and I'd like to introduce Renee Nekaneg, our Associate Planner, who will be giving the overview this evening.
Thank you very much. Hello, commissioners. Hello, those participating here in the chambers today. I am here to present on the appeal to a decision made, a reasonable accommodation request that was previously approved at 131 Valley View Avenue.
Sorry, minor technical difficulties. One sec. One moment, please. Sorry about that.
All right, so continuing, the purpose of the hearing here tonight, an appeal was received on October 21st in response to an October 17th, 2024 approval of a reasonable accommodation request.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can we go to slideshow?
For some reason this evening, it won't auto advance. So I'm putting it down into this draft version of it so I can advance it manually. I apologize for the.
Thank you.
Should anything be unclear, we can zoom in. I do know about this function, so. Appeals to decisions made by the director are heard by the planning commission. The planning commission must review all the items on record, hear a public hearing, and hear testimony from the appellant, applicant, and any other interested parties. The planning commission's role this evening, and by the recommendation of it is the recommendation of staff that the planning commission convene a public hearing, discuss the staff report testimony, and ask questions of staff, applicant, and appellant as needed, and approve the resolution denying the appeal in part and approving the appeal in part, modifying the director's approval to include the amended project and amended findings and conditions, which we'll review more closely as we go through this presentation. We have here two images of the site and setting of the project. The highlighted property on the left is the project site at 131 Valley View Avenue. To the left, east of that property is 135 Valley View Avenue, and to the right, to the west, is 127 Valley View Avenue, which is the residence of the appellants. As again on the right is the project highlighted in yellow, and to the left, and I apologize if I've mistaken right or left, please ask me to clarify if so, is an overlay, a very, it's a simulated overlay of the project over the property, which we will also discuss more in detail. So the existing entitlement that is being appealed is a request for reasonable accommodation to provide the applicant, an individual with a disability, housing under the Federal Fair Housing Act and the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, also known as the ACTS. The approved project includes enclosing and expanding the front porch, adding a bay window to the front of the residence, enclosing an existing covered porch at the east of the residence, expanding the bedroom at the northwest rear of the residence, and expanding the existing dining room at the northeast rear of the residence with an attached open uncovered deck. We have here a floor plan numbered with the items in question. Number 1 is the porch enclosure. That's okay, I'll just. Number 2 is the bay window. Number 3 is an enclosing an existing porch, and I'll clarify that that's an existing covered porch, so it would be just enclosing with the walls, no change to the roof. The expansion of the dining room, the expansion of the bedroom 4, expansion of the dining room 5, and the uncovered open porch 6. And to be clear, so this is the floor plan. What we have next, thank you. Sorry, went fast, is the site plan. So this is the site plan that was provided in all of the materials, both for the amended project plans as well as the currently entitled plans. To be clear, this site plan does include an attached ADU shown in red because this is not a part of the project. The ADU is included on the plans, but is not by default approved, as this is a ministerial. ADUs are, accessory dwelling units go through a ministerial process and so this ADU, although shown in the plans, is not a part of the project we're discussing this evening. So in terms of zoning consistency, a request for reasonable accommodation supplants any other entitlements that would otherwise be required for the project at hand. In this case, the project as proposed, would have required a major environmental and design review and a hillside exception for several of the items that would not comply with the applicable zoning standards. That includes the setbacks at both sides of the property, the front setback slightly for the porch enclosure, and the development of any new development on a ridge line. There are several elements of the project that would comply, including lot coverage, natural state, and the maximum height for a residential property. So this one's a little bit hard to read. I'm going to read this from my staff report, if you'll excuse me. I'll just make sure we have all of these elements in place. But I'll start by saying the decision to approve a reasonable accommodation request is based on 6 factors we have listed in the municipal code. These 6 factors, not all 6 factors must be met or to be able to approve the reasonable accommodation request. These 6 factors must be a consideration of the request. And I'm happy to read off all 6 per anyone's request, but I am going to focus on 2 of the findings, findings 3 and 4. So finding 3 notably is whether there is an alternative accommodation which may provide an equivalent level of benefit. Staff spoke in length with the applicant as well as they provided additional information showing that any other alternative accommodation which would have the same impact would require a mass reconfiguration of the existing interior layout of the home and would require in that major modification, which is both a major cost and in this case, there are, due to the existing site conditions of an existing leveled, concrete pad, there's no additional excavation into the hillside. We also have finding number 4, which whether the requested accommodation would negatively impact the surrounding uses or properties. We do acknowledge that this would have an impact on surrounding properties. And just to note that the addition, although would encroach into the required setbacks, would not expand beyond the existing elevations. Again, this is specific to the elements in the project. And as amended, which we will show in the slides coming up, will not increase the existing overall height of the roof line, which is well beneath the maximum allowable height of any residential property. I have our SEQRA finding here just to reiterate that this is exempt from SEQRA as new construction of small structures. So following the receipt of the appeal, several months later, the original applicant did submit amended plans in January 2025 that addressed the discrepancy of the height. The original document did approve a height increase on the plan set on the reasonable accommodation, which was noted incorrectly in the original finding documentation, which said there would not be an increase in height. There was, of course, in the plan set an increase of height. However, the finding remains the same, that would not be an element that would have rendered the project not approvable. However, the amended plan set, I'll speak a little slower, is largely exactly the same as the previous project. However, this project does keep the roof height at the same as the existing. So these are the existing approved elevations. And these are the amended elevations provided in the January 13th plan set, for which we have in front of you today and is the recommendation of staff to include in the resolution to approve. So to focus on the appeal, the appellant submitted a timely appeal on October 21st, following the October 17th approval. Following that initial appeal, there was additional follow-up with a statement to expand on the reasons for the appeal. The reasons for the appeal can be summarized into 4 claims: nexus, alternative designs, fire hazard risk, and due process, for which I'll briefly address each item. So nexus, the appellant asserts that there is no nexus between the disability of the owner applicant and the requested accommodation. So city staff spoke in great detail with the applicants regarding the disability which falls under the Americans for Disability Act and is eligible for this type of request. As well, the applicants did provide information that is protected here today. That is protected information. But nothing that would require staff to have followed up asking for additional information. Alternative designs, the appellant asserts that the city failed to investigate potential alternative designs. It is not a distinct requirement that the applicant provide rendered alternative designs to the requested reasonable accommodation. Staff had extensive conversations with the applicant for other possibilities to meet their goals to accommodate their needs at their property, and there were none that met the same qualifications. Fire hazard risk. The appellant asserts that the fire hazard risk posed by the reasonable accommodation is too high. There is no existing potential fire risk that could have rendered this project unapprovable for planning staff. There are elements in the new fire maps that came out yesterday certainly do place the property in an area where there are this could be potential. However, existing laws, including our city laws and the building code, state building code, will be applied to this property in the building permit stage, and all fire safety measures will be required at that time.
Just to follow up on that just a little bit more, as I bet many of the commissioners are aware, the draft CAL FIRE maps were released yesterday. And we did look at this address under those new draft maps. And we also asked our fire department and our building official if anything was modified in their recommendations. They originally supported the project back in October. From the fire department, I want to be clear that these are draft maps. They are not official maps. They have not been brought forward for official action. However, and as echoed by the building official, this project's already located in it's called the WUI, the Wild Urban Interface, right? And new construction, new homes in that designation would be under the same regulations that we would look at for the CAL FIRE maps once they're adopted. It's a hardening of new construction, roof, windows, vents, et cetera. Additions today to existing homes are not required to have any hardening. So nothing changed in terms of the building division, the building official's review of this project. He is still in support, and the fire department is still in support. The regulations, while the draft maps have been released, the regulations did not change. They still find this project not only approvable by planning, but approvable by the city of San Rafael.
So the fourth point is due process. The appellants assert that the appellants have been denied due process. Planning staff has properly complied with all applicable local, state, and federal laws in processing the reasonable accommodation request and the appeal in terms of public process as required by the state law as well as our municipal code. So public comments were received. Additional information, as previously mentioned, initial statement was received from the appellant. The applicant also sent some additional information as well as some additional comments from the other neighboring property at 135 Valley View. Some additional comments were also received from that neighbor at 135 Valley View this afternoon, which are shared in the packets and are available for any member of the public to view should they.
Just again, on the dais this evening are the comments that were sent today. They've also been added to the city's website, and we do have a copy for the public, but I wanted to make sure you saw all the correspondence.
So the Planning Commission has the following options this evening. The first option, which is staff's recommendation, is to deny the appeal in part and approve the appeal in part, modifying the director's approval of the reasonable accommodation request to include the amended project submitted on January 13th, 2025, and the associated findings and conditions in the resolution. The second option is to deny the appeal and uphold the director's approval of the reasonable accommodation request in its original form. Option 3 is to grant the appeal, overturn the director's approval of the reasonable accommodation request, and direct staff to return with a revised resolution of denial. And option 4 is to continue to the appeal to allow the appellant and the applicant to address any of the commissioner's comments or concerns. And that concludes this presentation.
Mr. Chair, I also want to make an introduction, although not in a room with us this evening, but virtually. We do have the legal counsel that helped us with this land use case. Connor McLean is available for questions of staff as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret, and thank you, Connor, for being here.
Good to see you all.
I will now open the public hearing with the appellant. Will the appellant please come forward and give their presentation? Pardon? Margaret.
Sure,
be
you
doing-
can ask questions of staff at this time, or you can ask questions of staff after the presentations. It's however you prefer.
Are people okay with waiting? Yeah. After, please.
I'm sorry, where's the clock you were speaking of? I'll be happy.
It's being put on as we speak. Sorry. about
Pardon me?
that. It's being added, right, there you go.
It's a 3-minute timer. I've got
Yes, sir.
10, please.
Oh, actually, to our IT person, can you give him 10 minutes, please? That's the appellant's timeline. Thank you.
And while I'm getting that 10 minutes, I guess I can introduce myself. Josh Sullivan, it's in some of the papers. My wife, Lisa Dalgallo, is in the audience, as well as some of our neighbors. You may know the folks at 131 Valley View or not. I've got 10 minutes, actually a little bit less than that now. So I'm going to give you a quick roadmap, tell you what we're looking for, tell you why we're looking for it, and then go through in greater detail, to the extent time allowing, the purpose behind my arguments. First, the what. We are appealing the October 17 report by the city. Want to make that clear. That's October 17. We're not time traveling. We are appealing the October 17 report. That is Exhibit C to the materials you were provided tonight. One due process argument. There's a number of ones that we make in our written materials. You don't necessarily need to consider them. Time has passed. Concessions have been made. We've got a problem with what is labeled as Exhibit F, 1/13/25 plans. Our city statute says we appeal what? The original decision. Go to the text. Original decision. There can't be original decision that takes into consideration something that was submitted by my neighbors on January 13, 2025. That is a due process issue. You are being asked to approve something that is not part of the October 17 decision. That's why this should be denied. That's what we're looking for, is a straight denial of this reasonable accommodation request, because you guys are experienced. I know there's lawyers and others on this staff. The California Code of Regulations addresses this, just beyond the city code. The city code gets essentially, here's your model statute. It's adopted across the
Sorry,
state.
if you could stay
There's
near
a
the
number of
microphone,
cities.
I just want to make
Can
sure.
you hear me?
I just want to make sure that we can hear you on
So
via Zoom.
there you get model stuff like that. Really, where the rubber hits the road is the California Code of Regulations. Were this to see a courtroom, the California Code of Regulations come into play. And there's a regulation that says, hey, you know what? They can come back
Sir?
anytime they like to make their plea to the city. They can renew this reasonable accommodation request. They can get it right. That's what we want them to do, is get it right. And so the why part, they gave us 6-part, here's what we need to have to our house. Well, the city has not, as we argue, have shown this work is necessary. If you look at the October 17 report, finding number 2 is an omnibus finding. There are no analysis, singular. There is no analysis of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It says to you guys, we find it all acceptable. That to us is sorely lacking. What the city needs to have done was tell us and tell you why each of those requests specifically ties in to my neighbor's disability. The law requires no less. That doesn't happen here. You can look at it. They try to spin it. They try to give you additional information. They give you an additional report. That's not there. Where the rubber meets the road, that's not there. You can't necessarily, at least to us, approve this without that information. It's building a foundation or building something on a foundation that's lacking. Finally, and I'll be really quick. Yeah, here's what came out yesterday. I'm glad that the city's acknowledging it today. I think they've known about it. We've known about it. The idea that there's no fire-related concern here and to dismiss our fire-related concerns, we consider that's folly and foolhardy. And there is a big red box there, which is the ADU, at least on the maps you've been shown. That is an additional 750 square feet. We can't ignore the reality. You can ignore the legal reality. It's a physical elephant in the room. When you build on the other side, as our neighbors have planned to do, you have an uninterrupted string of 4 houses, while some may be fire hardened, ours included, some aren't. And then, as you know, our neighbors, because it's not a complete remodel, as you've been told, have a tinderbox attached to it. That's not appropriate. That is something that is a genuine concern, and you have the city telling you, you know what? We didn't address that concern. Why? We found this omnibus approach appropriate and necessary, because the way the law works, and I don't want to instruct you guys on the law, but if you find it's necessary and you find it's reasonable, you grant the RA. And so when they got the necessary part taken care of, they were 90% down the line of granting it. And so we want you to guys say, time out. We want you to slow this down. Reasonable accommodations, and I'm running out of time here already, they run or don't typically run with the land. Reasonable accommodations are, I've got a dog or a service animal in my apartment. You know, again, I'm going to California Code of Regulations 12180 for my examples. And so this isn't me, this is the state giving you those examples. It's a reserved parking space because I have issues with walking and I need to not get first come, first serve. I have issues with government income being my sole source of income, so I need a cosigner. I need to pay my rent at a different time. Those are our typical reasonable accommodations we get in housing. I'm ignoring employment. So here, what you're asked to do is approve hundreds of thousands of dollars in improvements that in the end, they're not going to ask them to take down. They're going to say, hell no, we put in hundreds of thousands of dollars of improvements. That runs with the land. And so before you do something that runs with the land, you ought to think about it, because we all are on a lifespan. And when we're gone, those improvements will be there if you approve them tonight. And so I think it's your job to stop and say, hey, no, we're not going to do this without giving a reasoned analysis. So let's go in the time I have, at least to the necessary part of that. And look, if you look at finding number 2, and then if you compare that with figure 2 on page 4, which is again, the rendering on the drawings that were provided tonight. Number 1, they say the front porch is justified, and this is in finding 3, because it provides a safe transition from the front of the property to the existing entrance. Guess what? You look at photos, it's an already enclosed front porch. But if you look at finding number 2, there is no statement about why an enclosed front porch accommodates my neighbor's disability. There's no nexus there stipulated from them. I mean, you're not going to find a nexus there. No mention. Bay window, number 2 on your exhibit 2, or excuse me, figure 2. There is no discussion of necessity with respect to why that bay window is required or tying it into the disability. You look at number 3, east porch enclosure. Bingo, necessity not discussed at all. So you go, and I'll jumping over rather number 4 to 5 or 6, which is the big enchilada here, the dining room kitchen expansion. Again, necessity not discussed at all. However, they give you a justification in finding number 3. So again, we can go to finding number 3 to find their justification, give them the benefit of the doubt. And so they say, you don't need to grade there. And so I beg you, go to my neighbor's backyard. Come to our backyard, go to the other neighbor's backyard. I'm sure we'll all like to have you there. check it out. That is not something that's construction ready. That is a pad that got poured by a tenant that just poured it out. There was no grade. And you know, water seeks its own level, concrete seeks its own level. It's 12 inches in some part, less in other parts. It just got spread out and it's there. There's no grading underneath that. So to say that this can be construction ready is misleading. Also, there's no drainage at that property. Our property gets all the water. They haven't put, you know, look, no downspouts, no gutters, no drainage. There's gonna have to be significant site preparation in that backyard, 59 seconds, regardless of where you are. And so I really, in the time I have left, want to address the legal issue because you're being misled. They've grafted on the staff and maybe Connor McLean. There is no legal requirement here on equal level of benefit. I want you guys to go to Section 12177C of the California Code of Regulations. It has the equally effective standard. And the staff says we've got our equivalent level of benefit standard that we rely on based on past practice. I say, go to the statute. This statute's been around for 5 years and it defines equally effective. And I'm quoting it. It means the alternate accommodation or modification will allow the person with the disability to use and enjoy a dwelling or housing opportunity as well as the requested accommodation would have. There is no discussion of how much it would have cost. That report is full of discussion about how much it would have cost. It's irrelevant to you. It's what the benefit provides. And so at that, I got to leave it. I've got a ton more to say, as you know. I've been very inefficient with your time. I thank you, though.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Margaret, should we ask questions now or wait until after the applicant, or can we do both?
It's really the prerogative of the chair. You can ask questions at the end. You can ask that questions after each presentation, whichever you find to be most efficient.
Okay. My guess is that we'd like to ask questions at this point. You'd rather wait? All right. Okay. Then why don't we call up the applicant to come forward and give their presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Underwood, and this is my husband, Habibullah Habib Hasteh. Oh, and I should give my 10, oh, okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize.
Yes, please.
Question, sorry about that. Okay, so I'll just respond to a few of the comments that were just made. As far as the ADU, that is out of the question. That's not relevant. That has nothing to do with this application. And we have not made any, and we haven't applied for permission to build it. So it's out of the question. The 6 points, the discussion. So the front porch is not currently enclosed. We have non-standard stairs, non-conforming stairs, which are very dangerous for Habib. They're dangerous for anyone, actually. But Habib has post-polio syndrome. And post-polio syndrome is an ADA recognized disability. I don't know what you know about it. I don't want to have to go into a lot of excruciating detail, but it progresses over time, so that this ability so that he's had multiple falls recently because of the constraint in the dining room. He was also told by doctors that he should use a wheelchair to slow down the progression in the disability, as his leg, he has nerve damage and an atrophied leg, so that this isn't a serious and dangerous condition. So that's the reason for the dining room space. There isn't sufficient room to move around it, even with multiple disability devices that he uses now, some that you see, some that you don't, because of braces and so forth. And also, we need to be thinking about that, the ability to use a wheelchair. So the front porch would be enclosed so that we could put in an elevator, because the house has it's a one-story house, but the basement is a lower level, which means that to go from parking to your house, you have to go up these non-conforming, very dangerous stairs. And so that the enclosed porch would allow us to then take the current porch and make it a foyer, put an elevator there. So that's one of the ones. The dining room I've just explained. The enclosed porch on this side would be for the laundry. The laundry's in the garage, which is down a flight of very dangerous stairs. Clearly, someone in his condition cannot be going up and down the stairs to do laundry. So that would be enclosed for that reason. And the bedroom is very small. We explained in our original application about the number of about ADA regulations. You need a 5-foot diameter in order to turn around with these different mobility devices. So I think those are the reasons we did put it in our original application, and you would see it there. As far as the quote unquote modification, the only change from the original submission was the roof height. We had originally proposed to put it higher, but we realized I won't go into the details. We had some misguidance from a designer. We realized we don't need to increase the roof to do the addition. So that I think that explains all of those within the context of someone with a clear disability that is recognized by ADA. And you can see that these are these kind of accommodations are pretty minor. Also, the fact is that the house to the 127 is when we add these 4 feet. Remember, it's only 4 feet added to the bedroom. Adding 4 feet will not put us closer proximity to 127 because it's at an angle. In fact, the current house is already closer, so that is immaterial. This is a very modest accommodation. We were looking at the minimal accommodation that we could make. As far as the dining room extension, it would be still more than 20 feet from 137. Is it 135? 135. So that it's not an issue of density or being closer or causing any issue with that. And as far as the surface in the back, it is a flat surface. We've had engineers look at it. There would be minor adaptations for it. And of course, we would be putting in drainage, French drains and so forth to create a better situation than the current situation for both us and neighbors. Habib, is there anything else you would like to add? Part of the 4-foot extension is it's the primary bedroom and bathroom. So it would be for the bedroom and the bathroom. Right now, the bathroom is 6 by 7. Obviously, someone who uses mobility devices and certainly a wheelchair, but even without a wheelchair, it's very difficult. And as I said, because of this, the problem with flexibility and stability, Habib is susceptible to falls, and he has fallen several times. It's obviously very dangerous for any of us as we age, but especially for someone with this kind of, sadly, lifelong issue since he was an infant. Anything else? Yeah, I think that nothing else comes to mind right now, but if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But again, I think the important thing is not to, that the ADU is something that we haven't, that is not in consideration at all in this case. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for your presentation. At this time, I'll turn to members of the commission. Do you have any questions for staff, the appellant, or the applicant? Do you have any questions for staff?
I have one for staff. When looking at the sheet index, there was not a landscape plan listed at all. And so for this project, beyond repairing whatever is disturbed by construction, there is no landscape plan required?
A landscape plan has not been provided for this level of the project review.
But is required?
There's no residential landscaping requirement. There would be comments from the fire department should any changes be made to the landscape, but this is a
And
residential.
Generally, in the
project.
past, when we've looked at residential improvements, landscape plans were required. Is that no longer true?
So for this project, a new landscape plan was not required.
Okay, beyond fixing whatever was disturbed by construction.
Certainly, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rodby.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I just want to confirm the issue over the height because it has become up so many times. On the original application, you had like 22 feet, 22.2 feet. And now the revised one without the height shows 23.5 inches. So there's a foot difference. And I'm just wondering.
Sure. So there's a
Okay.
couple discrepancies in the height. So in the original application, the existing height for the residence was noted as 12 feet 9 inches, and then an additional 4 feet was proposed at that time. In the amended version, the existing height was corrected to be 13 feet 9 inches, which we understand to be included in the misdirection given from a previous architect, as well as input from a roofer to correct the height to 13 feet 9 inches. So the new plan shows the corrected height of 13 feet, 9 inches, and then no change to that height in the proposed plans.
So the original one had mistakes in it or errors on it, is what you're saying. Okay, thank you. Also, these additions, well, when they apply for a building permit, will they be subject to newer fire regulations than the house that's there currently?
So
Materials and so forth?
we asked the building official that question directly, and no. So they will be, if a new main dwelling at this location would be subject to the fire safety code requirements, but additions to existing homes are not.
So do you have you asked the fire department or does anybody know that the additions add more fire risk or the same?
I don't think it's a one-for-one equation, and I'm out of my lane, so I want to be very careful in what I say. But the fire department and the building division work very closely on all of our plans. They routed these plans at the entitlement stage, and they review them at plan check. And the fire department was able to support this project. So that's what I can say with confidence.
And then one last question. I know the ADU is not in discussion, but the drawings that we have, it shows that it's covering that 4-foot expansion. Is that a mistake?
I can clarify
Okay,
that
thank
actually.
you.
So the way the plans are drawn in this perspective plan, the addition to the bedroom would structurally rely on the ADU existing, and a condition is included in the resolution that should the ADU not be eventually proposed or constructed, that the applicant would be required to return to planning if there were any major structural changes to having that addition to the bedroom. So it is shown there. It does appear to be.
So
related,
unless
but
they
it's
get the
not.
ADU approved, they can't have the 4 feet? Is that what you're saying?
So theoretically, with the reasonable accommodation request, that addition, that expansion of 4 feet is included in the approval. Structurally speaking, we see that there could be a change if the ADU is not constructed, but the 4-foot extension is still requested, or if the ADU is, perhaps an ADU or other structure is provided first, then that could be on there. So the condition is that when the project comes to the building permit stage, if there's a significant change in the design to potentially accommodate the ADU not being there, then planning would reevaluate for any potential changes of impact.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Hey there, couple questions, just for clarity. I think our job here tonight, and you can confirm this and maybe council, is to discuss the 4 appeal points. Not to deviate from that in terms of the design or anything like that. We're supposed to talk about nexus, due process, and the 4 points. From what my understanding is, we're usually limited to discuss the appeal points. Is that correct?
So yes, and it's the full staff report in front of you, all the presentations you've received tonight, all the evidence in the record. What we look at the first time and and right up through the end of this hearing is the findings. And then then the appellant's points, and then the rebuttals delivered. And if you have any questions about any of those three major prongs of the stool, we'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions? Then I think that we are ready to hear from any other members of the public who wish to speak on this matter. Please come on up to the podium. If you wish, state your name and where in San Rafael you live. And I believe you have 3 minutes.
I'm Scott McRae, and we've been in Marin for 50 years, 35 years at the current address, and 20 years prior to that in Mill Valley. So we're at 135 Valley View. And thanks for clearing up the height question. That's been something I've been looking over the plans over the last 4 months, and they have changed a couple of times, and it was a pretty simple answer. So super thanks. I just want to discuss more of the fire hazard risk rather than the actual structure and the uses of the property. My interest is triggered by the fact that we've been working with Fire Free Marin for a long time and getting our property some defensible space around it. So we've chopped down just about every tree you can name, pine trees, acacia trees, and taken out huge amounts of juniper bushes, including the roots, at great expense. And we're beginning to look a lot more like Bakersfield now than what it looked like when we moved in. But most of the landscaping is done or is not there anymore just because of the drought. And then what we've done in clearing the property, we're interested in making it safe for the rest of the community as well as any first responders that come there. I don't know if the new map shows us in a high fire risk zone. Someone said that we are in it, but the map that was provided in the staff report shows that we are not quite in it. It shows us to be about a half mile from the high to very high CAL FIRE fire hazard zone. And it's interesting because when I first sent an email in regarding the project, I had discussed how we had a lot of fires in our area, including a few years ago. We had airplanes and helicopters both dropping water and retardant on an area 1/2 mile from us that is in fact in the CAL FIRE zone. And according to, I did a little fact checking, and if the winds are even still, if there's a fire at the end of Ridgewood Avenue, which we're 1/2 mile from, even though the map shows us not to be in the high fire zone, we're just in the WI, it would take 1 to 2 minutes to reach our house. And it's not a great deal of time, admittedly, to do much. And that is from the U.S. Geological Service, say that these wildfires can move about 15 miles an hour. That's about 1/4 mile a minute. I used to run 1/4 mile in track, and it takes a long time for a human to do it, but for a fire, it would be in our laps. So I think the quibbling about whether or not we're currently in a designated fire zone is not particularly important. I took a photo from our kitchen window today of what the view is of the end of Ridgewood Avenue. Valley View almost intersects with Ridgewood. And it's a main running path that a lot of us use. And if you can see it in there, there's a water tank. And that's the issue that we're talking about. That is the end of Ridgewood Road. It's the beginning of the high fire danger. And the reason is because it's home to a huge eucalyptus grove. And according to Mill Valley, where they have the state, the community tree is eucalyptus because they're everywhere. We actually had the fire department visit us at our place there. We're right above Tennessee Valley Road in a huge grove of eucalyptus. And they said, there's not much you can do about it. He says, once those things get going, it will sound like a fleet of 747s overhead. You can't believe how horrible it is. don't even think about packing a go bag, just leave. Well, we don't have that here, but the end of Ridgewood does. And what's going on at the end of Ridgewood is like what's going on in a movie theater or an airplane where they have no smoking sections. You may remember those days, but it says you can sit in the no smoking section. And if you're in the
Sir.
row in front of the no
Sir.
smoking, the next row is the smoking. Well, that's us in Ridgewood.
But Ms. Norcray, I do apologize, but your time has expired.
Okay,
Thank you for your comments.
I was just getting going. Anyway, thanks very much for your listening.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, please come to the podium, and if you wish, please state your name and where you live in Centerville.
Hi, good evening. My name is Shayna Eskew. I live at 134 Valley View. So I'm across the street from all of my neighbors. I came here tonight just to learn a little bit more about the project. I think I have a better understanding now. But I'll tell you, from what I do know, is I don't think any of the neighbors are like completely objecting to the other neighbors making some changes and doing some work on their house. I think the consensus from what I've heard is they just want them to get together to find something that would work for everyone, because there is a really big concern about the fire danger. So maybe there's something they can come up with that will address that and help the other neighbors with the accommodations that they need. So I don't know what this what this group can do to help in that regard, but that seems like the answer. Nobody's saying, no, you can't do anything, as far as I know. So anyway, that was it.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Is there anybody else who would like to address this issue? No? Okay, then I will close the public hearing and take the meeting back to the commission for deliberations. Is there any commissioner who would like to begin deliberation? Commissioner Kett?
Well, first of all, really sorry to hear about your disability, but looking at your plans, it certainly looks like the modifications you want to make to your house are justified to accommodate the disability. But, I've been looking at houses for, 20 years for the city now, and my first sort of pass on this thing is this is a small house, and it's a pretty modest, addition you're putting on the house. So I think the impact on the neighborhood is going to be pretty minimal. The only other comment I had, I know landscaping is not required for this project, but I think your project would benefit from a little bit of front yard landscaping. And your site plan says there's an existing concrete sidewalk that goes to the front porch, which obviously doesn't exist. But when you do design it in such a way that you ramp up and eliminate all steps. You've probably thought about that already. And anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Kent. Any other commissioners like to weigh in on the deliberations?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I don't, when I look at the design and what you're proposing, I don't find anything individually particularly outrageous. They are very modest additions in my perspective. I can definitely see the bathroom being elongated to approach an ADA style bathroom. So that makes complete sense to me. I like Jeff's idea about ramping that sidewalk up and making sure there's no stairs. So that's a good one. In terms of the fire conversation, I'm just a general comment that, every other town in Marin County has amended their own municipal code to require the WUI requirements for hardening even on additions and remodels. San Rafael is the only outlier city who has not amended our own code. The California Building Code is absolutely correct, and what we're doing follows the California Building Code to a T in terms of if it's not a new structure, then Chapter 7 in WUI areas does not apply. So that's accurate. But, our town might want to, especially in light of recent events, review our own municipal code. And if we feel we want to amend it to include additions, it could probably alleviate some of these concerns that are coming up from the community. Currently, they're following the code on what it says. So just comment and educate. I have to deal with this all the time. So, So on the appeal points about what's reasonable accommodation or not, I don't know if that's in my purview. It sounds like staff and legal staff as legal counsel has analyzed this carefully in terms of due process. Seems like our legal counsel is, so I'm just going back to the appeal points, and I don't feel compelled that I've seen a reason to support the appeal at this point. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Summers. Anybody else? Then I will just say that I agree with the general sense of Commissioner Kent. I mean, this is not an enormous addition to the property, given the size of the house relative to the property, and it seems reasonable. And I trust and have faith in staff's good faith effort to address these issues. And so at this point, I will ask if there is no more discussion. Is anybody open to making a motion? Sure. I've been asked for a clarification of the motion.
Yes, I'm going to read directly from the staff report, which is explicitly would be the motion as opposed to, it was a summary a little bit on the screen. So I'm just going to go here to the option.
Sure.
2 points are that we're denying in the resolution, those 2 points that we were.
There is an accept in part and deny in part.
Yes,
What would the
so.
denying part is?
Can I jump in and explain a little bit?
Sure.
Yes,
Yes, please.
do.
All right, great. So San Rafael Municipal Code, Chapter 14.28.050, regarding appeals, says that after the hearing, the appellate body shall affirm, modify, or reverse the original decision. So what you're doing here is you are essentially modifying the original decision. You are approving the fact that, or you are affirming the fact that the reasonable accommodation request was approved. You are modifying it in that you are approving the January submission rather than the October submission, which contains corrections on height and some other issues, and you are otherwise denying the appeal, is the recommendation of staff.
Okay, and so the form of a motion would be that we can we have a little bit of help on that?
Yeah, so then Renee, you can read from the staff report what the form of the motion would be.
Thank you, Connor.
Yes, so I'll read directly from the staff report what staff's recommendation is, which is to deny the appeal in part and approve the appeal in part, modifying the director's approval of the reasonable accommodation request to include the amended project submitted on January 13th, 2025, attachment F of the staff report, and the findings found in table 1A of the staff report.
There, Commissioner who would like to so move? That is, well, I don't believe we've made a motion yet. We've just clarified the language of a motion.
What we read into the record is the recommended from staff motion. So we're waiting for a formal motion and a second.
I'll motion to approve the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Mercado and Robbie. We have a motion and a second. Margaret, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Mercado,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodby,
Yes.
Commissioner Summers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Yes.
Chair Haven.
Yes.
Commissioners Prevatelli and Sade are excused, so the vote carries. The project is approved.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you for everybody who came tonight and participated in that part of tonight's meeting. Now we turn to the director's report. We have two items this evening. One is the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. Presentation of the Housing Element Annual Progress Report highlighting progress on the policies and programs identified in the city's general plan and the city's progress toward meeting its share of the regional housing need allocation. Margaret, could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, Chair. Included in your staff report this evening was a packet with a full staff report and attachments, including the new, basically operation rules for all boards and commissions. So tonight I just want to provide a brief overview of what was already contained. So this evening before you is a presentation of the Housing Elements Annual Progress Report, highlighting the progress in the policies and programs identified in the city's general plan and the city's progress towards meeting its regional housing needs allocation, or RENA, which you'll hear a lot about. The purpose of this meeting and what we're asking for of the commission this evening is to review and accept the Housing Element Annual Progress Report of 2024 and direct staff to present it to the City Council for submission to the Community Housing and Community Development Department, or HCD, which is a state agency. This is an annual process for folks that are newer to the commission. Every year, we are asked to tabulate a specific numbers in a specific configuration and deliver those to the state of California. It's in all governed through Government Code Section 65400 that requires us to prepare these annual progress reports. As I said, they are due the 1st of April. A lot of this text is something that was in your staff report, and I will not read it to you, but I'm glad to answer questions if you'd like to have some at the end of the meeting. There are 14 tables in the pre-prepared spreadsheet sent to us by Housing Community Development folks. We really have 4 or 5 tables that really pertain to the city of San Rafael. So Table A is housing development applications submitted in the calendar year, not the fiscal year, for 2024. Table A2 is the annual building activity report summary, which breaks it into different phases, which is actually much more accurate to how they go through our city. There's things that are in new construction, which is buildings you can see underway. There's entitlement, which is the planning component where things are, if it's approved, there's an entitlement in place. And then the permits as we roll through the building phase of the project, and then completed units with certificate of occupancies. So the table A2 breaks that down into the different phases from concept to certificate of occupancy. Table B is a summary of prior permitting activity in the current planning cycle for the calendar year reported. Table D is actually probably in this year's report the most interesting, because that has a status and progress of the housing element program, which you commission is probably aware was recently adopted, and we're in a next series of cycle here. And that reports on each policy and program and the progress that we've made in this last calendar year. There are 44 programs and policies discussed in Table D. So just to kind of give you a small view on the numbers, there were 31 housing applications, not units, but applications submitted in calendar year 24. The total number of units was 440. The total number approved was 227, and the total was disapproved was 0. So the ones that weren't approved are pending. So that's what that strange question mark would come up for. I do want to say that this table was incorrect in your report. I will amend it in the presentation as I move it to council, if that is the direction commission gives me. We did have 200 dwelling units entitled. However, the 4 additional, the 2 to 4 was not in your staff report. That's C Street, a project in C Street. It's 4 townhomes that were previously approved, but they needed to have a map completed. So the map was completed in the last calendar year. So that's more detail than you may have needed, but I just wanted to point out that 4 was not in your report, but it should be, and it will be carried forward. Again, back to, I think the most exciting part of the report this year is the 44 programs that we are aggressively following to try to streamline development of housing especially, and create housing protections for vulnerable communities, reduce homelessness, and increase housing choices. I will say that the big table where we show our arena numbers and how we're doing against them, there's no change from last year. And it breaks my heart because I can promise you it's very, very busy in the planning offices this last calendar year and going around the corner. It's just that they didn't pull building permits or complete the projects. So we have approximately 18 major projects in the pipeline between foremost, well, pre-submittal, pre-application to certificate of occupancy. It's just not going to be a year where the report's going to show you that. If you go to the major projects page on the city's website, there's a lot more details about that. And what's not on the website yet is a new project that just came in on A Street for a mixed-use multifamily housing. So it is what it is, and we will turn the report in dutifully, but I promise it's not slow. It's quite the opposite. I don't think San Rafael has seen this level of development in quite some time. For example, Northgate, right? It's just, and I will take this moment and kind of scrunch into the director's report topic of, so when we had that, when the project was entitled, what isn't in the city of San Rafael staff control is when will building permits, when will the project get moving? And there's a whole conversation about construction financing and how this type of project gets phased out. And in this case, there's a developer that's in charge of the commercial pads, and then they are going to be working with different residential developers for the residential pads. They're coming in for a demolition permit next week for the Sears building. We've already had a pre-construction meeting. The commercial is moving quickly. They're getting the pads ready for residential development. At this moment, there's nothing languishing at Northgate. It's going to be, as the development team was telling us, they have an aggressive timeline for development at that location. So that's the best news I can give you, because entitled projects are important and we do that for a living. But the really, really cool part is when people move in. So that's coming along. It just isn't going to show in our report this year. The Planning Commission has the following options. You can accept the Housing Element Annual Progress Report as presented in your staff report this evening. You can direct staff to include more revised information, including maybe that typographical error that I pointed out, or you could take no action. This concludes the overview of the staff report. I'm here for any questions you may have.
Okay, are there any questions from the commission for staff? Commissioner Rodby.
Probably because just to confirm, why would not the Northgate units show up on entitlements then, even?
So they show up in the number of projects that were submitted, but it's actually a great question. I will double check. They may be reflected in this, but it's a great question. I will make sure that if they are supposed to be, they will be added to the table A is where they would have shown up. So.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Leary.
Thank you. This is, such great progress. Curious when it comes to the entitlement approvals, how long do they have? Is it 18 to 24 months before they're expired and have to come back? Or if it's the active a tenant map that vests them? Just curious.
Great question. Most planning entitlements today have a 2-year shelf. If the development team cannot proceed, so basically vest those entitlements is the legal terminology. If they can't take those entitlements, complete their plan check, submit for building permit review, and break ground in that 2-year window, they are encouraged to contact the city, and we will talk about how to extend those entitlements. For example, C Street was extended at least once, if not twice. As we all know, the economy has not produced a lot of housing recently. So it's a little, historically, it's been very challenging. COVID was horrible on the housing industry, as anyone can tell you. But once a project's been vetted and entitled, if it's coming up and they needed to apply for an extension, they have to tell us why, to the extent that's reasonable. And we will look at what's changed. If the condition of an impact fee, for example, has changed, we're going to ask them to meet the new impact fee. But by and large, we review the existing entitlement, and if it's still appropriate for that location, it is approved with conditions and findings.
So theoretically, if they were to let it expire, they have to come back for commission approval and new conditions could be imposed on the project at that time. Theoretically.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I was following it because the market is tough right now, right? And so building costs are up, and just looking at that 18 to 24-month horizon, it goes by fast.
It's very short, and it's a balancing act in cities. I want to say too, it sometimes comes to the zoning administrator if we think it's a very non-controversial request. So it has to go to a body of decision at least at a hearing level. We don't want to give 5-10 years of extension because we've now land bank a property, right? So a development team cared enough to make a submittal. We cared enough to do a very thorough vetting up and bring it to a hearing for action. So there had to be some window that wasn't in a perfect economy, which doesn't exist. 2 years is great, right? And again, we encourage our development teams to be in contact with us. Let us know if it's not going well. Some things were automatically extended during the COVID epidemic, but now we're post-COVID and we have, there's a project tomorrow actually going to the zoning administrator to extend entitlements on 3rd Street. So it's not unique to see that. And it's very heartening to see folks coming back, extending their entitlements and talking about their construction financing, because it makes me think it's penciling again.
Is it 2 years to submit a building permit application or 2 years to vest that by securing a building permit?
So it's the latter, but it's also how the conditions of approval were written. So the spirit and intent is you must vest your entitlement in 2 years. And then how you vest it depends on how your conditions were written. Historically, it was submit for building permit. There's ones that are saying issuance of building permit. The ones for Northgate say issuance of grading permit, building permit. We're very specific. So like everything else, we're becoming very legally specific in what we mean.
The building permit process, and since like maybe that 2-year deadline was created, especially on larger projects, has become a much bigger hurdle, to get building permits, especially on a very large project. So sometimes 2 years by the time you do construction documents and engineering and soils engineers and geotechnical engineers and traffic engineers, that 2 years can speed by pretty quickly.
It absolutely can. And we definitely are in communication with development teams, especially if they're coming up on submittal. Usually we've talked to them, I've already got a grading permit. We've been talking about foundations and infrastructure. We will work with them to make sure their entitlements don't go stale while they're in plan check.
And we just had one here in the commission, but that was
like in December.
The entitlements were about to expire and
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So it would be a very unusual event. I won't say it wouldn't happen, but it'd be very unusual for someone to lose their entitlements after they've gotten them. We really want to be good partners in adding housing and other new products to the city. So whenever we can make those findings to support an extension, we do.
Okay.
This is what the state asks for. And we've been doing a lot of work. Does the city maintain sort of internal forecasts as to how we're doing relative to our RENA numbers?
We do. We have a number of different ways that the pipeline projects show up, including a spreadsheet that we track market rate housing, what's coming in, how many of those units are market rate. The city has a 10% inclusionary, excuse me, program in place today. Development teams can opt to do half of the 10% as units and 10% or half of the 10% as in lieu fee. So we've seen different variations, but we are tracking the numbers. But it's important not to count our chickens before they're entitled. So it's always a balancing act.
Understood. Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the commission? Then at this time, I'll ask if we have a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second. My only input on it was I think the 43 items are great. I would say when you go to the council, maybe pick one or two that are really good, kind of highlight and shine the great work you guys are doing, because those charts are way too long to go through. And there's like a billion pages of just empty spreadsheets, columns that look really scary of what does that mean?
That was
So I would focus the squirrel attention on the like one or two. And I think there's some really good plans in there that you can highlight and kind of tie into some of the work you guys are doing. I think that would be great. So I will second the motion.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Mercado. Margaret, would you please take the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Mercado,
Yes.
Commissioner Radby,
Yes.
Commissioner Summers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with the abstentions or of absence of Commissioner Prevatelli and Commissioner Sadi.
And I, the chair, also vote yes.
How would you? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. I'm sorry to shake
And
you
when,
off.
and when we have an absent, shouldn't our alternate be a voting member?
So it's my understanding of the rules, as long as we have quorum, that is not the case, which I know is different from DRB, but I will confirm that and we'll be making sure that that's clear by our next hearing. My understanding is we only alternates vote if the quorum is low, if below quorum.
Got
But
it.
I will check.
That is
I'll confirm
different than
that.
we did it in the past. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the motion passes. And next up is the annual meeting of the Planning Commission 2025. Presentation of the regular meeting schedule for 2025, selection of the San Rafael Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair, and approval of the San Rafael Planning Commission public hearing guidelines. Oops. Margaret, could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, Chair. As the commissioners know, every year we have an annual meeting of the Planning Commission where we set the dates. We being in this case, you all, select the dates of your commission meetings. We do have a regular meeting of second and fourth Tuesdays. But we look at that and make sure that that makes sense for the upcoming year. We look at the election of chair and vice chair, and there's a process for that. And in years previous, we would look at the rules and procedures, which were unique only to Planning Commission. So this year, things are a bit different, and I will touch on those again in my presentation. But again, the full report and attachments were included in your packet. I always say that in case somebody's at home and thinking, this is what they're going on. So that's why I try to add in that there was more. So yes, basically what I just said, there's just three main things that happen at the annual meeting every year. Using the regular dates established by the municipal code, the standing meetings, the regular meetings for the Planning Commission are in fact the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month. Shown here in Table 1, pasted from your staff report, are how that looks this year. There's an unusual rule and a holiday. It's important to know that when a month starts on a particular day and it makes the commission meet before the city council, we don't do that. So sometimes it moves off the regular meeting just so the council has the first meeting of the month. I think that happens once this year, but that might be what, if you're looking at it and wondering why that anomaly took place, we have standing rules regarding that. And this year, November 11th is one of the regular meetings. It's the commission's pleasure if you want to state a new date for that meeting now. Staff's recommendation is to wait and see. Obviously, nobody is going to be clamoring to be meeting on November 26th either. So if we have the city's business to do, we certainly will be talking to you about a special meeting. But at this point, we're not gonna, it's not legal nor practical nor reasonable to meet on Veterans Day. So that's off the table. We'll talk more about as we get closer to that quarter of the year if we need to set a meeting up. Pursuant to the boards, commissions, and committees' rules and procedures, which was an attachment by link to your staff report. This goes over, if anything falls on a holiday, we look at it, and in this case, I guess the slide, I'm sorry, is what I just said. Basically, in this case, staff recommends that we not set a meeting for November to replace that meeting, but instead wait and see how the year plays out. Next topic is the election of officers. Chapter 2, Section 7 of the Boards, Commissions, and Committees Rules and Procedures set the framework for how we, the Planning Commission, elects their chair and vice chair. The new chair and vice chair will commence their officer roles at the following meeting, so not this meeting. For the Planning Commission, the office of chair and vice chair is rotational with selection based on the seniority or tenure of service, as well as the goal of not having any particular commissioner as a chair more than once in every 7 consecutive years as rotation goes through. Table 1, which is the next slide, lists the appointment dates and past service of chair and vice chair by each of the commission members. So looking at the list of each commissioner, when they were appointed, when they may have served as a chairperson, the suggested assignment is based on the criteria stated. Commissioner Mercado it would be the next in line to serve as chair, and then Commissioner Rodby would be next in line to serve as vice chair. It should be noted that a commissioner can decline. This is not compelling. It's merely the procedures that we have in place. And it's also standard practice that the vice chair would be the chair the following year. So those are the practices from our old rules and procedures and in the new procedures, boards, commissions, procedures that was created by this city clerk last year. The third topic, third and final topic, is the rules and procedures. And as I've alluded to, historically, Planning Commission had its own set of procedures. However, in 2023, the council adopted Resolution 15196, which created a adopted document that governs all the boards, commissions, and committees. It's really for the purpose of good government. The community understands what each of the boards and commissions do, their purview, we tried as much as possible to make the start time the same. Last year, I came before you and asked if we wanted to start at 6, and that was politely declined, I think for commuting reasons alone, and getting dinner and anything else you needed to do before you come here and spend your evenings with us. But trying to, as much as possible, have boards, committees, and commissions operate in a uniform manner so that the public doesn't have one set of rules for one meeting and another set of rules for another meeting. The one item that was asked to be considered to the Planning Commission this year is to move, many boards and commissions have a 2-minute public comment period as a standard instead of 3. I spoke to our city clerk today, and she's wanted me to be sure I explained not all committees, boards, and commissions have a 2-minute. There are at least 2 that have 3-minute ones. So it's not, we're not the holdout, but it's in the interest of uniformity and in the interest as we're moving as a city to translational services. We are trying to do Spanish and English going forward. It would be easier if public comments were 2 minutes in duration as a standard practice. So that's the things that the clerk wanted me to bring to your attention this evening.
Do we have the opportunity? I mean, if the timer, let's say there's 3 people in the audience, not 50. And could the chair grant more time if the public, or do we want to be really static?
The chair has a prerogative of deciding if they would like to make the regular, if you were going to do the 2 minutes, that would be the regular anticipated. If there were 3 people and they seemed very passionate and they had things they needed to explain into the record, the chair would have prerogative to grant additional time if that was appropriate.
And then conversely, if it's set at 3 and then we realize there's a room with 100 people in it, could the chair reduce that time to 2 for any specific meeting?
The
Stretch
Northgate
the-
experience definitely presented itself. We did we reset, we being in this case, the chair, shortened it so that, again, for the sake of good government, people could go home and go to bed before midnight, right? So they have some prerogative to move it.
We
So
were
that we
here for
can-
some of those, so.
Yeah.
Question, are you done or can I ask some
This
questions?
concludes the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Order of speaking, something I have a little bit of trouble with here, and I'm too bad counsel's not here to clarify this, like, legally speaking. Normally, we would do questions to the staff as like tonight, like prior to the applicant making. If the board had questions of staff, we would ask the staff prior to so we could get our questions clarified. I'm seeing something here in the order that after public comment closes, that staff or applicant responds to questions raised by the public. Now, staff, I have no issue with because it's staff trying to respond to the public. However, in my experience, if the applicant is allowed to get back up and answer questions, technically, aren't we supposed to reopen the public meeting and allow the public to then respond to any new information they might hear? So I think that could be a slippery slope, having the applicant come up after public comment is closed. And
So,
I mean, it's been a problem in the past.
right. My understanding of the flow of a public hearing is staff presents the report, the overview. It is common, this was an unusual appeal discussion tonight, but it's common to answer the clarifying questions, not deep questions, but, did you say the setback was 10 feet, kind of level of clarification?
Your questions of staff.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then have the chair open the hearing. There's wisdom in opening the hearing, taking all of the input, asking clarifying questions only of other folks is when they're speaking too. So you're just taking in what they want to tell you, right? Then closing the hearing and then going to deliberations. There may be an event that the hearing is reopened.
Well, I'm just saying the order that's presented here in this report says number 7. Public 6 is chair closes the public comment. Okay, nobody out there gets to speak anymore. But then item 7 after it says staff or applicant responds to questions raised by the public. If the applicant is the person up here responding and somebody in the public doesn't agree with what this applicant has said as an explanation and then has something to say, I think we should check with our lawyers, but I think we're supposed to allow reopen the public meeting.
When you say item 7, where are you looking?
I'm presentation of hearing or proposals, order of speaking.
Okay, great. Okay, you were on the attachment?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm worried, actually. I'm worried that we ask the applicant back up and it's a controversial, unlike tonight, it's a really controversial topic. And all of a sudden, it's 11 o'clock at night and all of a sudden 45 people get to talk again. So we have to be very careful about this item because I think legally we're supposed to reopen it if the applicant speaks.
So if the applicant speaks, you are definitely supposed to reopen the public hearing so that you can take testimony from someone who is not on the commission. Whether that means everybody gets another bite at the apple is a question I will ask our legal counsel and city clerk and bring back clarification.
Be
at the next
careful
meeting.
about that.
Absolutely, you're right. It can.
I've seen it happen.
Excellent point, Commissioner Summers. I'll get clarification on that.
You were like, no. It did. It actually lengthened a meeting by like an hour and a half
Yeah.
because of that very thing.
I will bring back clarification. It's typically the protocol is exactly as you describe it. You listen to everyone, you take all of their comments, you make sure you understand their comments, and then that ends the comment period.
Okay, at this point, I think I'm supposed to, well, Do any other commissioners have questions for staff? No other questions. Supposed to open it for public comment members, but we have an empty room here, so we'll move on to deliberations. Is there discussion amongst the commission to be had? No?
You want to be the chair, Aldo?
I'm happy to be the chair, but if somebody else wants to step up, I'm happy to hand that gavel over.
All right, if there is no other further deliberation, I would like to ask if we have a motion to adopt the 2025 San Rafael Planning Commission regular meeting schedule, elect Commissioner Mercado as chair and Commissioner Rodby as vice chair, and approve the San Rafael Planning Commission public hearing guidelines. Could we have such a motion?
Can we condition it that we'll be looking into that item? Because versus adopting this?
I need a motion in a second before, I'm sorry, but so stepping away from the rules for a moment, I will definitely bring it back. It's not a condition of the approval unless it's how you want to word the motion, but I will bring back clarification on the opening and reopening of the public hearing regardless if this commission wants to condition it that way or not.
And if we were to find that we were unhappy with what you come back with, not that we would argue with it, but we could reopen this and change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make the motion.
What's my motion? I move that we approve the annual meeting director's report as outlined by the chair.
I'll second, Rodney.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Summers and Rodby. Margaret, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Mercado,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodby,
Yes.
Commissioner Summers,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with absentees as noted.
Oh,
I did it again. The last time.
it's my last time as
I know.
chair. My
And-
very
And
last.
Chair Haveman, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you, sir. It's been a wonderful year having you as chair. Thank you so much for your
Well,
efforts.
thank you,
and time.
Margaret. Okay, the motion passes. And on commission communication, are there any planning commission members that have any communication? No communication from commission members? Okay. Then at this time, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Recording stopped.